just need
Okay.
grid title solar.
Let us open our work session, as it's labeled today, supporting community through quality public service. And in our packet, we have
That'll just pop up.
some information, but we have a special presentation by Elena
Yes.
with a PowerPoint, a very colorful PowerPoint.
Yeah.
on
A gloomy
Lake
day.
Superior North, One Watershed, One Plan Update.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I wanted to provide you with an update because there'll be, the board will be asked to make a few decisions which you haven't been asked to make. And so I know that there's a few commissioners that are new, and so just to provide you an update, I'm the district manager for the Conservation District, but those of you who don't know, I'm also the county's water planner. So our office was designated, had as an individual designated to be the water planner for the county, and that's myself. So, and I've been doing the water planning job now since 2011. So I've been through 2 water plans with the county. So our most recent water plan is the Lake Superior North One Watershed, One Plan. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information to bring you up to speed, and we'll go over maps, and then I'll let you know what the changes are going to be. So just a quick brief update or brief history is that 2009 is when the conversation started to move from this local county water plan, which the county has, that was adopted in 2014, to this larger One Watershed, One Plan. The county decided to be a pilot area for the One Watershed, One Plan and move forward with the process. And in 2017, finalized the plan. So in 2014, just so you know, for the 2 water management plans, is the county has adopted the watershed plan, or the water plan, and the plan covers the Rainy River headwaters. It used to cover the entire county, but now it simply covers the Rainy River headwaters. As of 2017 in May, the county has, with the 4 agencies, or local governments, that's both counties, Cook County and Lake County, and then Cook SWCD and Lake SWCD, all signed the memorandum of agreement. We've adopted the plan, and we're now 2 years into working off of that plan. So the county currently has 2 water management plans, both expiring at different times, both kind of different, but both trying to achieve the same goal of healthy watersheds. So. The Lake Superior North Watershed, when they transitioned out of the county water planning, we had to really focus on targeting, prioritizing, and measuring the plan. Those are the big things that were required with the state. We also had to keep in mind that they needed to be swimmable, fishable, and drinkable. Up here we have a lot more protection than we have restoration, so that added another challenge. This is the whole area. Grand Portage is included in the plan, but they have their own plan. They were asked to participate. They chose not to, but we still have them included because it's all the same watershed, so it's still all part of the map. Always opportunities to work together and collaborate together. And just so that the county is aware, the SWCD and the county both went through what's called a level 2 performance review of local water management planning by the state, by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, and it showed that we were doing really well on achieving the goals and the actions within both water plans. And one of the recommendations was to move to this targeted, prioritized, and measurable outcome, which we're achieving through the One Watershed, One Plan. So it's pretty good news. Additional benefits of moving to this larger watershed scale, because this will also be a change that's going to come again. We're going to eventually have to do the Rainy River headwater area. But the additional benefits is to understand that it's a venue for collaborative planning at the local level. So we understand more of what the state's doing and what the federal government's doing than we did 4 years ago, 5 years ago, through this process. We have a better understanding of what some of those special interest groups are doing. For example, Trout Unlimited or the Steelheader Group. We understand a little bit more of what the Nature Conservancy is doing through this process. Its concentrated efforts are among agencies and partners towards more targeting. We're not just willy-nilly fixing things. Oh, this came up, this came up. There's a bit of a method to it all. It's coordinated restoration and protection between partners for the whole watershed. And it also helps serve as a larger funding vehicle for potential projects. So, again, here's the area. So if you have a hard time visualizing, you can kind of see the line, but there you can see the whole area. Like I mentioned before, the Rainy River headwaters, we haven't started that plan yet. I would assume that will be asked to participate with Lake County and St. Louis County in 2021. The county will be asked to participate. I don't know, because we have such a small percentage of it and most of it is federal land, we don't have as much that we have to do with the plan. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. Because we have such a large land mass in the Lake Superior North, we were the fiscal agent, we were the driving force. It's kind of flip-flopping now, where Lake County will be more of the driver, and along with St. Louis County. And it will be an interesting experience because there's a lot more issues on their end that we will have to be involved with. So just letting you know now.
Can you give an example?
Mining will be the big one. Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Much bigger.
Yeah, and the Rainy River Headwaters is finishing what's called their watershed restoration protection strategies. The Lake Superior North has that completed. It has a lot of good information. We'll incorporate that into the plan once we do an amendment. But that is almost done, and it will be done when we do the One Watershed, One Plan. And within that area, that whole watershed, there's only really, I think, 2 rivers that are impaired, and they're in Lake County, and one of them's due to a farm. So they can work with that farmer. But within that document, once that becomes really heavily looked at, you'll see that there is an enormous amount of minerals that have been found. So it'll be a very interesting process how this plan works out.
Well, it's a tiny bit of our county, but it is the dividing line between, so, I mean,
Yeah.
and that line doesn't prevent the water.
No. Nope, it does not. It's still all flowing that way to the Hudson. So, so how did we get the plan to where it is now, to get it adopted, get it done? Just a few things people always ask, well, how did you determine what was going to be in it? We went through a process called zonation. It's was done by the DNR. It uses a value-based model, and so we had surveys that went out. The public participated. We had local officials. We had state officials. As much input as we could. It weighs it all out, and then it spits out maps, which I don't have a bunch of examples of. I don't think I have any here, but it spits out all these maps based on these values. And then what we did is we also held an enormous amount of meetings. So we had a policy committee that was engaged. We had an advisory committee, and the advisory committee, you can see there's an example of a map. We worked through all these series of maps. So it would say like, say water monitoring, that's kind of my thing, was on one of the big values. So we would look at, well, where are the lakes that are doing really well? Those need to have probably continued protection. Where are lakes that might need restoration or more work on them? And so we were able to identify with all the professionals through a series of meetings almost once or twice a month on Fridays for a couple years. And then we had 2 large public participation meetings. We had around 40 people for each of the meetings that we had. And so we were pretty excited about that. And what came out of those meetings is also the landowner knowledge. Where do people see what was going on? So we had zonation that we did, we had public input, and we had the professional advisory input. And then all this data got processed through this zonation process. And again, we had lots and lots of meetings. We modified our priority work areas down to the subwatershed level. And then we ended up with a map that looked like this. The red doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It may mean that it's an area of protection. It means it's an area we need to look at. So what we did was we were like, okay, this is huge. What are we going to do? We looked at the priority areas for work. So tier 1 means it's the highest priority. So if you open up the plan and you're like, wow, why are they only working here? This is probably an area that either needs a lot of protection or a lot of restoration. And then tier 2 is kind of the next level, and then tier 3, and then we have a general, the whole entire watershed.
Is that the flute reed?
That's the flute reed in our area, yep. So for Cook County, it would be the Poplar River, which the whole watershed, not just the river, so looking at all the water flowing down. Near Shore Lake Superior doesn't show up on this map, but it's generally that bottom black line. So if you know, familiar with the North Shore Management Zone, North Shore Management Board, it's that mileage going up. And then the city of Grand Marais for sure, Flute Reed River. So we kind of have a lot of those higher priorities in our area. This could change when we do an amendment, but that's where we're at right now. So it started with, we had, through all this process, 220 action items. There was no way we were going to accomplish that. I know, right? In 10 years. There was no way that was on anybody's capacity to be able to do that. It didn't always fit in with what our goals were as a county and at SWCD. So that got whittled down into around 35. And so what we tried to do then is look and prioritize it again. So we have our main priorities that we hope to accomplish in 10 years. We may not. but we may, that's kind of our goal. And then say we're building on that and we're looking like, what else can we move forward with? We can go to the secondary. Within the plan, there's a secondary plan. And then there's all those other like 100 plus that are the regional implementation activities. A lot of those are already getting done, but they're good reminders sometimes, especially for us, for the SWCD, when people are asking us and we can say, it's not our jurisdiction. Maybe you could go, it's in the plan, but you could go maybe ask DNR or ask the Forest Service or ask MPCA, because we don't have the capacity to do that and it's just not in our scope of work. So that's a brief update of what is in the plan and what it's like. So it highlights existing county work that's already being done. This hasn't been updated with the AIS transition, but the SSTS, shoreline, WAC is Wetland Conservation Act work, local water management. And again, so Cook County and Lake County operate different between the counties and SWCD, so this is just the general. So when we look at funding, this is how the funding comes in, and then it gets allocated. For example, local water management gets allocated to the SWCD since I'm the water planner. Conservation delivery, cost share, and then already existing programs that are out there. But then it also adds other priorities. So for implementation, stormwater, SSTS, historic land use practices, timber, aggregate materials, so that's like the gravel pits, stream connectivity, think of culverts, invasive species, both terrestrial and aquatic, climate change impacts. With our increased rain events, we are having to change the way we're doing our work and designing work so that it can hold up and withstand to larger and more frequent rain events. Priority waters, drinking water, that would be, public health or land services, wetland management, data collection, education outreach, and then supporting roles. So, we can help support with impaired waters, but we're not going to necessarily go and fix horrible waters. Like, for example, we get questions about the depth down by the Tack Harbor. There's some funky stuff going on with groundwater. That's not our thing. Construction and industrial operations, the county does some, but, larger projects, that's the state's role. Fisheries, we can collaborate with. Wild Rice Lakes collaborate. So just some examples of areas we can collaborate with. So funding, always people want to know about the money. There is approximately $8 million over the 10 years to implement the plan is what our plan has in it. That's what we're estimating it'll cost to implement everything within the One Watershed One plan. Don't worry, we're not going to ask the taxpayers generally to fund it. We just kind of spread it out over years and years and years and see what we can do. Lake Superior North Watershed, we're fortunate in our watershed because we can tap into federal money through the Great Lakes Restoration, which a lot of places can't. We can tap into coastal funding through NOAA, and again, a lot of areas can't. So we're able to leverage our state funds with federal funds. A lot of areas, again, can't do that. So that stretches our dollar a lot farther. We're already making progress in a lot of areas within the plan with forest management, stormwater, invasive species, culvert inventory, and the list goes on and on. We are anticipating a strong return on investment through education outreach actions. We're doing a lot with education with teachers, with local citizens, collecting data, just continuing to build our relationships. So the implementation progress, how do we track it? We have an annual meeting with our policy committee, which is made up of the 2 commissioners and 2 board supervisors, one from each SWC and one from each county. We have to do an amendment in 5 years, and that will include the RAP, State of the Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies, any new data we collect. We also, at the local level, as a water planner, I need to track the progress towards the plan, so I loosely do that. We have collaborative efforts where we track this, and then the policy committee, again, has established an MOA to help track all of this. So to the good stuff. We're implementing the plan right now. Currently, for the fiscal year of 2018, there's a funding base of $250,000, and then 4.8% of the anticipated $8 million of projects. So that's how much it's covering of the projects within the plan is 4.8%. We got $387,059 for 2018. that's based off of a lot of different things, but that's what we were awarded. How does this get distributed? How did we determine the projects? The funding's allocated. We have a local work group that meets. That includes the SWCD staff and the county staff that would like to come. The policy committee, we then put our projects together, figure out a budget. We proposed several projects. The policy committee then met, approved the projects. Cook SWCD was designated the fiscal agent because we had a large amount of the projects. And then our projects that we're accomplishing right now include an erosion map. This is phase 1. And maybe this will work, but you can't see what I can see. I can't show you what it looks like because I don't know how to get it to project. But the erosion map is going to be an interactive coastal map that we're working on for the entire North Shore from Lake County all the way up to Grand Portage, I believe. And what it will do is determine erosion rates based off of slope, based off of soils. It's looking at the bathymetry, so what does the lake look like underwater? How shallow is it? How deep it is? It's going to look at cliffs. So it's helping, especially Lake County has asked for this to determine for where to build. They have people building and they have erosion rates sometimes at 10 feet a year. So you have people who, even though they met setback and they're 175 feet back, they currently have Lake Superior on their back door, and they've showed us pictures of this. So they're looking at making really large decisions of, we need to tell people to quit building so close. Our office gets an enormous amount of phone calls. We feel very helpless in that we can't tell anybody anything. So this map for us, we're excited for this tool to be able to show landowners when they come and ask us, you're in a high erosion rate area. We tell people to move their houses because we don't know what else to tell them at this point. The lake is going to continually rise. We're having somebody from NOAA come tonight to talk about lake levels. So this tool, we're hoping it's going to be done in 3 years. It's a long process. They're going to do some modeling with it. The North Shore Management Board has gotten phase 2, which is going to start doing that modeling so that we can show landowners. And then phase 3 is going to be rolling it out to the public. And we're hoping to provide education to the Planning Commission, to everybody that's involved, commissioners, everyone, so that they can understand why this is necessary to start making different land use choices for the longevity of Lake Superior and for our resources. The second amount of money went to the city of Grand Marais for their stormwater projects. As you all know, they're changing Highway 61 and updating it. And so some of that hope was to be able to do some nutrient management that MnDOT is not going to be doing. And so helping to implement some of that. That's an ever-changing progress and project right now, so I don't have an update for you because it changed as of last week what's going on with that. But I can provide you, not for the highway, to be clear, it's just for our portion of helping with the nutrient sediment management. So I do know we were able to include a giant, it is it's bigger than the square, sediment basin with the city on 2nd Street when they pulled up that road. And so if you go check it out, the stormwater comes in, and then all the sediment settles down, and then they slurp it up, and so it doesn't end up in the lake. So that's an enormous amount of change, and we're really excited about that. So
That's under the road?
it's under the road. It's huge. I took pictures so we can see it, and it's this tall from here to there, and it's gigantic.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge sediment basin. It'll help capture a lot of stormwater. So working with the city to determine what we have to do next for some more implementation. The funding doesn't expire until 2021. And then the last amount is, especially being a pilot, we've used a lot of staff time to be able to facilitate everything and to move forward. We're estimating that we've leveraged to date, just with having the plan, around $1,760,000 just for plan. So pretty excited about that. And that's just not our area, that's the whole watershed. That includes Lake County and Lake SWCD. So through federal funds, through state funds, through county funds, just whatever we can.
The coastal erosion stuff is really interesting. My in-laws' entire extended family is in upstate New York, and Lake Ontario is dealing with incredible erosion there too. And it's an international issue, and how they manage the water levels and the locks and the dams, and it's just like, oh boy. And then with the weather and climates as they are and changing, it's just like this ever,
It's a mess.
yeah, yeah. In Montreal is flooding, I mean, that's all part of it, it's just
Yep.
like, wow.
It's fascinating if you look, not to talk too much about this, but if you go on the East Coast, because we've been trying to look for resources to provide to landowners, especially landowners that have more, what new things can we try to see if we can help with, reducing some of the erosion. But the resources for the folks on the lake or on the ocean are fascinating. And they have similar mapping tools that we are developing, which is a lot of what it's based off of, where, but with theirs, they can show where the water is going to go all the way back and for this amount of surge, and it's just, and here's things that have worked though for them. And what's fascinating, what we've seen too, is if you can keep the shoreline intact and keep your vegetation there, you're going to have a better chance of fighting it. East Bay is kind of our proud right now. We're 3 years into doing a shoreline planting, and everybody's seen those waves hit that East Bay, but they did a shoreline planting in 3 years now that's well established. They're putting more and more vegetation in, and it's holding up. It's not, the water isn't going all the way up to the building, and it was just by putting 3 feet back of native vegetation. So it's impressive. So that's what we keep telling people. Hopefully people will listen. So this is where we're at right now. We're excited for these opportunities and for this funding. And so where are we next? So Reese, just as of last week, Bowser approved $24 million in funding for local water quality priorities developed through the watershed plan. There was 5 pilot areas. I believe now there's 10 plans adopted throughout the plan. I could be wrong. There might be even more. So the funding is not allocated. You would think we'd each get our equal pot, but we don't. It's allocated based off of the amount of water you have, based off your populations, and then there's also a general base. So 2020, we did get an increase. We're up to $599,776. The funding's allocated through the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Again, we're having our local work group meetings right now. We have our policy committee then will meet and approve the project funding. What's going to be different that I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of is that in 2020, we are going to ask the state, if the board approves and the county approves, to split up the fiscal agents. Currently, the SWCD, Cook SWCD, has been always asked to be the fiscal agent. I, as the district manager, will be requesting my board, we are not the fiscal agent for the full funding, because it puts all the liability for everybody's project on us, and that's a lot of liability for our tiny little office that is only funded basically through grants. And so what we're requesting from the state is that the county, it will be either Lake County or Cook County, enter into their own agreement and their fiscal agent for whatever money they would like for their projects, and then the 2 SWCDs will enter into their own agreement. We will still all work together. We just will not, we will have that piece of that fiscal responsibility and liability separated out. The other change will be is that before we were just letting the representatives from the committees approve everything. We just went on our merry happy ways. We didn't have to have any wait time for anything, get all our documents signed. We cannot do that anymore. And so after our committee meeting in November, Commissioner Dukirk is our representative. She will come back to the board asking for the Board of Commissioners to approve the projects. And you get to have that discussion then, discuss who will be fiscal agent and work through that process. And then we come back, probably will be to me, and then we'll work through the state and get all of that finalized. So what are our potential projects that we're looking at to spend that money up? We came to the table with 20 projects at the local work group. We were really excited, and we got it whittled down to like 3. So we're going to be addressing stormwater planning and projects within the city of Grand Marais. We're possibly will be doing one more stormwater project, but it's currently dependent on our current allocation and how that's going to shake out. The city of Two Harbors is putting in a proposal to do a stormwater management plan because they're seeing the benefits of Grand Marais, which is pretty exciting. We were hoping that this would happen because I know the 10 years I've been with the district, or 9, it's been a push to get them to do a plan. So this is good news. And then through their process, they also have some very large stormwater management plans that need to get, or projects that need to get done. Both funding, I should step back, requires match. So through this process, when we're working at the local work group, we have to determine at least 10% match. And so we work through how we're going to get matched. So for the stormwater planning, the city of Grand Marais has already offered to provide match for whatever projects we're doing with them. The city of Two Harbors will be required to have match, and then the other projects will also have match. Then we're gonna do some best management practice installations. We're working on what that means right now. We don't have our full meeting yet, and so we're hoping to do some shoreline plantings and that type of work, but we're still working on that. It kind of depends on where the money rolls in, and then a large chunk of the money will be through SSTS work. So the proposed projects will include, Lake County would like to hire extra staff to work through their inventories, through all their septic system work. And Cook County is proposing to work on reducing nutrients and loading into lakes through bringing the systems that are not compliant back into compliance. So I'm avoiding the word enforcement because it's enforcement, but we can't really use that word with the state. So we're working on how to phrase that, but the Cook County is proposing that. Some of the funding also is to help folks bring systems back into compliance so we can get the systems in really fast. Some of them have been out of compliance for up to 8 or 9 years. So those will be the projects, and they eat up that money really fast. It was shocking. And then the last amount of money will be for management of the funds. And so the county will have to determine who will be the fiscal agent and then who's going to be the manager. That means doing agreements and doing the reporting, and then the SWCDs will be me. So that's how that will work. So those are the updates for the One Watershed, One Plan that I have. It's pretty brief, but I didn't want to bog you down with an enormous amount of information. Questions? Yeah.
That North Shore Management Board, Commissioner Stay said that the increase in funding came from inland waters.
Okay.
And the shore of Lake Superior was not counted on that?
No, it was not. They forgot about that part. So, yeah, that's my understanding too, that I heard from Commissioner Spay. So, but it helped us at least a little bit. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because I had the, up in Grand Forks, I had the Cora last week and met with them, you know, the lake's coming up, the storms are getting a lot bigger, and, you know, we're starting to lose the road on the bay now.
okay.
So,
Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, so we're trying to figure out what to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's going to be an ever-increasing issue, for sure.
Yeah, 'cause the courts have it there,
You have plans to move the casino?
The road
It's-
is eroding, or,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty low there, along that, yeah, the road, side.
Yeah, everybody's got a plan for it, but it's tough, huh?
Mm-hmm, right?
Yeah, put the road behind the houses.
Yeah.
I got a question, really, and thanks for all you do.
Mm-hmm.
In a county such as ours, we have, what, 91-something% federal and
Mhm.
state land. And so, how do you work with that as far as projects? Do you have to be on county land or privately owned land in order to do anything?
No, well, so for our office, I'm only going to speak for the Conservation District because I don't work, the county has how they work. For our office, we're charged with mainly working with private landowners, but we work with any landowner. And because our funding, so if we have landowners come to us, we're going to do our best to find funding to do their project. But say some of it might be on federal then, or state or county, then we would go to the landowner and figure out how do we work with them. Sometimes we do have projects on state land or federal land, and that's a collaborative effort then of how do we work together.
So you go to the DNR or you go to?
We could, yep.
Superior National Forest?
Yeah, yep. Often we don't. They normally come to us, you know, and ask how can you help us, and so we just figure out how can we work together. But, you know, for example, we've got projects we're trying to find funding for the Flute Reed watershed, and I reached out to the DNR, what do you guys need help with getting done that we can work together? Evidently that threw up red flags like, why isn't the DNR doing their own work? But if we can collaborate, and if we're already in the river, then why not just do it together is kind of the way we work. So, but our funding is we're so dependent on funding that it just, we have to wait for we have projects in the hopper, but until we can get the funding to do it.
And then you mentioned invasive species in there. That is also a DNR concern
Mm-hmm.
for our waters.
Yep.
But it's only on lake, or is invasive species included on surface?
So we have, within the One Watershed One plan, it has both terrestrial, so that's the land invasive species, and then it also has aquatic invasive species.
And what, I would be just curious about some of the language on that.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head, I can
But
look
I'd
it
like
up.
to get that,
Yeah.
I'd like that, thank you.
I think one of a project that worked really well with a lot of different government entities was the Reservation River
Yeah.
Restoration Project. And if they could all go as smooth
I
as
know,
that
right?
one did, it would be great.
Yep.
That's good.
Definitely. And we've been asked, I know, by the Park Service up there to help and look at a few projects too, so. yeah.
Where do the terrestrial invasive species fit in? How does that fit into everything?
Like, what do you mean, into everything?
Well, I feel like the focus is water.
Mhm. There, so, okay.
So water management involves like planting stuff, vegetation, and that's where the invasive
Yep,
stuff
and so the
plays
plan
in?
is both soil and water.
Gotcha.
Yep, and so, yeah, definitely for the aquatic, that's pretty obvious. But the soils, you can look at things, for example, when you do aggregate mining, so when you do those gravel pits,
Mhm.
we've gone in, the CCAT, and so we, like this summer, we had a technician, and last summer we went out and helped. We looked and saw what pits that have been abandoned, and what do they have for terrestrial species in them, invasive species. Do they need treatment? Do they need follow-up? And then you look at active pits. Is the equipment getting clean? Is it transferring seed bases? So those kind of things are the easiest ways, I think, to kind of address that one for invasive species. Also, those boot brushes, the CCAT, which is the Cook County Invasive Species Team, they were part of that, with working with the Forest Service to get boot brushes at trails. Trying to provide as much outreach and education as possible to folks, working with the Highway Department, doing the treatment along the roads. MnDOT does a treatment. When we have our meetings, everybody provides updates. Here's what's going on for the terrestrial invasive species. So that's incorporated in the plans to keep that on the forefront.
And those are the two categories, terrestrial and aquatic.
And aquatic, yep. And so they have different funding mechanisms, so I think that's too where everybody gets really confused. The aquatic invasive species is funded through the Internal Revenue Services, and that is allocated funding strictly for aquatic invasive species management. And then this invasive species, the terrestrial invasive species, that one doesn't have necessarily direct funding to it. So right now, the Cook County Invasive Species Team, we're the fiscal agent for them. And so next year, for example, we have funding to hire another technician. Our office worked with the Highway Department through federal funding or state, I don't remember, Department of Ag, but got funding to do treatment and more outreach, and that grant's extended, so we'll continue to work with them. So it's just, again, the terrestrial one is based off of what we can get for funding to accomplish that work.
So there's no subterranean.
No, not that I'm aware, but I don't know everything.
It was interesting on the Tower Sedan line, they discovered some bacteria that's
Interesting.
very old down there.
And you don't want to bring that up, huh?
Well, he was kind of joking about it. He was like, well, I don't know.
Interesting.
So, well, just to follow and maybe you can get me more information, with terrestrial invasive species issues, have you looked at anything about prevention, or you used the term, I think of prevention, and then you have mitigation, how to deal with it. Is there anything that's happening with that?
The Cook County Invasive Species Team does what we can do, and so that's a group of which the county's part of, different local agencies, and so they do as much as they can for mitigation or treatments, and then for prevention, the biggest thing that anybody can really do is education outreach, because you can't really clean the car tires. Yeah, so education outreach has just been the best to do, but a lot of it comes from cars and from people's boots, and when you're on vacation, I don't normally want to go sit and listen to a half-an-hour presentation about invasive species, and so that mechanism of how do you reach those visitors coming in, and maybe it's looking at different ways to do that. Maybe it's working through CCVV. I don't know, but it's definitely a concern.
Chippewa's been doing a lot.
Chippewa does a lot.
Outreach and pool parties.
Yep.
Which gets
A few people
involved in the conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've done outreach with different groups visiting through activities. I've handed out literature.
Mhm.
You want your little baggie of
Yeah.
quarters to go through the car wash?
Yeah.
You have to listen to me for 2.5 minutes.
So the car wash issue, can that be done with, I know in some states with invasive species on surface or terrestrial, they have washing stations for trucks and
Okay.
vehicles, off-road vehicles and stuff.
You know, I don't know. I think that's a bigger conversation that I'm not comfortable with.
Invasive Species Committee meets next week,
Yeah, yeah,
on
so.
Wednesday.
And I'm not associated with that as much anymore. I've delegated that to one of my coworkers, so.
I'm assuming Highway Committee has worked really hard on that when Kayla comes to those
Yeah.
meetings.
Mhm.
And so we take little steps and then we get kicked in the teeth when we spend $23,000 extra to have special seed mix on a Gunflint Trail project and the truck was dirty.
Oh,
So, yeah.
It's definitely a concern. It changes your watershed, it'll change your water quality, it'll change your soil quality. Invasive species do, so. It's all connected.
Thanks, Elena.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have nothing else listed on here, but I will give a short little report. Yesterday, I stopped in to talk to Joe Fredericks about a few things, and he said, you know, it's kind of confusing when I go to the website, and I see on one part, committee of the whole, and then I see the other part where it says work session. So he says, would you work on that? And so I think for the next couple months, let's just kind of tuck that away in the back of our mind, and so that come January, we have a clear identification of what we are and who we are and all of that, so.
I think what's confusing also is that we have not approved our policy. And at the beginning of the year, we said committee of the whole would be recorded and we haven't determined the work session. And that's where the confusion is for the radio because they want to know if they need to be here with their recording devices. So I'm going to ask again. Yes, roll your eyes on it, Bobby. Go for it.
you're right.
You need to approve the county board policy on how we do that.
So
And
that's
that will
something,
help with the confusion.
yeah, something we need to
Help
think about.
mitigate the confusion.
Well, so, I mean, should we put that on the next work session and talk more about that, or how should we address that?
We certainly need to talk about it. We have November and December, and then in January is when we, you
It'd be
know,
nice to.
that we have it all set before then.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you like, we can put it on the next.
Committee of the whole.
Sure.
yeah, I don't know, maybe the next, or we're not gonna have one in
December, I
right?
don't think so, because we're changing around our
Right.
other meetings. So November will be it then.
So
Okay.
we better
Is that
figure
the
that
discussion
out.
about the bylaws, or is there a separate policy?
It's the county board.
Policy and
Is it the
procedures.
county? Yeah, which also determines which meetings are recorded and something like that.
Okay, I'll see what I can find.
Okay, we have some time, but we'll put it on the November agenda.
Great.
Okay, very good. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, roll your eyes at me.
Roll my
Buddy.
did not roll. I gave him
The look,